All right. Well, good morning, everybody. We are very excited. We have a very special guest. We're very excited to have Ben Purcell with us today, who is the Chief Creative Officer at David and Goliath. And we have Nicole Gordon as well, who is the Director of Talent. So Ben joined David Angelo and four others in 1999 and opened the doors to the agency in LA, helping to grow the agency from scratch and securing the Kia Motors account. Before David and Goliath, Ben freelanced for 4 years, working at a variety of different shops from Band of Genesis, BBDO West, Fallon, TBWR Day, and Wyatt and Kennedy. And as a challenger brand, Ben helped guide Kia Motors from number 12 import in sales to number 5. And for Kia alone, Ben has worked on 7 Super Bowl spots, including the Cannes Lion-winning film Eco Warrior with Melissa McCartney and the Josh Jacobs Tough Never Quits campaign that helped raise awareness for $2 million to youth homelessness. So this Super Bowl spot, Tough Never Quits for Kia, is one of my favorite ads of all time. And it's actually the reason that I'm at Brand Center today. And the reason it stood out to me so much was because it was at a time where brands are promoting themselves as a luxury, money, lifestyle brand, whereas this took a very different and bold approach that shined light on an issue much larger than the brand itself. And before the pandemic, I practically had to beg the agency to let me in for a tour, and Josh Miller was kind enough to give me a tour. And there was a very particular wall that stood out to me. It had art, it had a bunch of different art pieces on it. And when I had asked Josh what it was, he kind of asked me a question back, and he said, "What are you afraid of?" And he explained to me that this question is asked to every new hire at the agency, and they have the opportunity to interpret this into their fears into an art piece that can be on the wall. And I just think that that was just so cool. So I know that Ben is going to talk with us today about how to find your brave. So I'll give it away to you guys.
Thank you.
Guys.
Go ahead. I'll go ahead.
I just wanted to introduce myself before Ben gets started and sharing all about Find Your Brave. I'm Nicole Gordon. I'm the Director of Talent. I've been at the agency for about 6 years now, and I oversee everything across the board recruiting-wise and talent development from internship all the way up. I'm excited to be here. A little bit about myself. My background's in psychology. I graduated my master's at 26 and realized that that was not my calling. And I kind of pivoted, and maybe, there's some of you here that did that. And I knocked on a headhunter's door, and basically they took a risk at me to learn creative recruitment. And I've been doing it for about 13 years, and I've never looked back. I love it. And the thing that keeps me here at David and Goliath is definitely the culture and the purpose-driven work. I'm looking forward to meeting some of you if you're joining the session later, and I'll pass the mic back to you, Ben.
Hey, everybody. Nice to be chatting with you. Thanks for that intro, Kara. I'm excited that you actually did a tour of the agency. There's some new hires that we have that still have yet to be walking through the agency. But yeah, it's quite an experience being there, and we really try to live our culture from the inside out. So I'm glad you got to experience that. I'm not a former graduate of VCU, but we have hired quite a few people from VCU. So excited to be chatting with you guys. Our Chief of Social Impact, Blake Winfrey, went to VCU, my former partner of 6 years. Steve Yeat was also a graduate there, and we've hired a lot of strategists as well. So today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about Brave. With the name like David and Goliath, Brave comes right out of our DNA. So we want to talk to you a little bit about finding your brave. And today I am going to show some work, but it's about sort of these themes that you can kind of keep in mind as you're looking for your job and molding your career paths, and not only finding those jobs, but keeping those jobs. Just some things that I've picked up with starting an agency from scratch for 23 years. I thought I could pass this on to you, and hopefully it'll be of use. Okay. So find your brave. This is the hallway. Kara, if you remember that, we actually have Hayes, the graffiti artist, came in and did this picture about find your brave, and we just said do whatever you want, and this is on one of the walls when you come in there. But when you think about brave, I think some people think Brave is about, swinging blindly into the fray and just doing something crazy for the sake of being crazy. But I think what we've learned is it's about being very precise. It's having courage and the resilience to be as impactful as you can in everything you do. But Brave is really in all of us. Yes, it's our agency, but it's everyone on this call as well. But just a little bit of context of David and Goliath. Brave is language that we use a lot, and it does come from kind of where we started there. We have these 10 brave ways, just to give you some context here of the 10 brave ways on our wall. So when you come in, these 10 brave ways are everything from be a mentor instead of a manager, or great work is everybody's agenda, or even no assholes, please. These are just a list of some of these 10 brave ways that we live by. We have this brave stage where we have different managers come up and talk to them about some of the things Kara was mentioning there, things that are personal, their own acts of bravery and how that comes through in the work. We have a nonprofit today on Brave, but Brave is really a filter for all of our work. But Brave can take many different forms, and that's what sort of the theme of what I'll share with you today of different forms that Brave can take and how that can manifest itself into some work to sort of prepare you. One of them is Brave is relentless, and we have well, I'll start by just talking about Super Bowl. Super Bowl is something that at Dave and Goliath we participate in quite a bit. 12 of the 13 last years. We always have work in the Super Bowl. Some of it is a lot of it is Kia Motors, but it's also for other clients that we have. But it's a process, and one of the reasons I bring this up is you have to be relentless in order to survive and produce work. So I just wanted to sort of prepare you a little bit, level set, so you can kind of see what awaits for you. It is an uphill battle. Thank you, Jon Snow here. And, but it's essentially, if you think about, I think sometimes when you're in school, you find the thing that you like, and you find the things that maybe your instructors like, and you still hold on to those things, and those things are what you like is more important than anything. But I think, in order to sell work through, sometimes what you need to do is think about all these different steps along the way. And you just need to be resilient to the end. Just a typical process for, the Super Bowl was just a month ago. And we started on that maybe 6 months prior, and of course you have all these other projects going on concurrently, but just for the Super Bowl alone, often projects you put, 1 or 2 teams on it. Super Bowl is a pretty big deal. We have 10 different teams on that. And so the 10 different teams are all just, churning as much as they can to try to unearth some insights, and really you come up with all this different work, and we might have seen maybe 600 700 different directions, scripts, platforms, all that sort of thing. And once you kind of narrow that down to the top 10, the top 5, then you get it in front of the client, and then you have multiple levels of clients. So you have not only the American clients, but you have the Korean clients, you have the global clients, all these levels. And once you sort of get all that, and this is quite a process, a lot of back and forth. And what I see sometimes with juniors is they're not always ready for the multiple battles that you're going to have. So I'm just sort of telling you to sort of prepare you for that is, and then you build animatics from that, and then you have to get in focus groups. And a lot of times it's not really to decide what you do, but to sort of figure out ways to sort of optimize it. From that, you then have revisions, and then it's more reviews with the client. And then if it happens to involve a celebrity, which you often do in Super Bowl, then guess what? Chris Pratt is already in something else. Oh, guess what? So is so-and-so. So you're kind of this constant sort of scramble. And then when there's IP approvals, intellectual properties, you have to talk to them, make sure that they're interested in the idea as well. And then you have CG discussions. So if there's going to be a lot of computer graphics, you need to make sure you have time for that. So this is the process, and the ones that sort of survive are the ones that are the most resilient. So I tell you that to sort of prepare you, and then you repeat the whole process again. For instance, this past year, we went through all those stages. Tell you some of the little stories here too, is we actually, once we went through all those stages, we had a spot that was all about a Terminator. We were leveraging the Terminator property in kind of an interesting way. And after we'd gone through all those levels, all those approvals and everything, it was even approved by the people at Skydance, who owns the rights to this. When it finally got to the senior most person there, he said, you know what, that's not how I want to twist my brand, because we were kind of taking it in a new direction. So then you start the process over again. So it's all about that resilience, So then we had this other campaign that we were ready to move with. That was featured a sloth. It tested extremely well, and it was another sort of twist on using a sloth. But as you have further discussions, we started to think, you know what, sloths, you're starting to see them a little bit more. Maybe somebody else will have a sloth in the spot. We need to be more original than that. And sure enough, someone else actually had a sloth in their campaign. But then we also had discussions with with CG companies, and sloths have hair, and we know from doing Kia hamsters back in a few years ago, hair can be incredibly difficult. So there wasn't even time to pull it off in a way that would be realistic. So with all these things in mind, it's again just that perseverance, that the bravery manifesting in that way. So where we ultimately ended up was with this, which I'm sure many of you probably saw it, was RoboDog. This lovable dog who is searching to find his sort of forever home, and it finally meets that with the EV6. So once we sort of have sort of this premise of this, we work with the CG company to build this, and we thought, okay, we've got 8 weeks to pull off the CG, we're going to be okay. But then we send the script to the Today Show and say, hey, this is what we're going to be running. All we send them is a script and a screenshot, and they said, we love this. We think this is going to be great. Can you finish the spot 2 weeks sooner so that we can air it 2 weeks prior to the Super Bowl as we do the Super Bowl kickoff? So now everything that's been lined up to this certain date now has to move up 2 weeks. So again, it's just about that resilience. So all that work led to this, and I'll play it here. So that was the that's what it all led to. But I just thought it might be helpful to kind of see everything that goes into that, and how that ties back to bravery. Another thing that still kind of builds on that is and these are just sort of some brave tenets that I just want to pass on to you, is brave always finds purpose. One of the things you spoke about, Kara, was the purpose that you saw in that Josh Jacobs campaign. And that's really what we try to do with everything, and make that part of it. And as you work on projects, I just want you to sort of keep that in mind. Like we've been doing this for, it's now part of how we kind of present ourselves as an agency. We're a purposeful agency. And you see other agencies that are kind of getting to that, and clients are looking for that as well. So it makes business sense, as well as you feel good about what you're doing. But if you can also help some other organizations and use your platform to do more, that's a good thing. That's what we strive for. This happened a couple of years ago. We decided right after doing the Melissa McCarthy campaign that did extremely well. Okay, let's walk away from celebrities. Instead of that, let's take that money that we would have used on a celebrity and really help some students. The Kia was building this new Telluride, and we thought, why don't we help the kids? It was a small town where this factory was made. Why don't we give scholarships? And it's all about the great unknowns. It's not about the celebrities. It's about the great unknowns. And we really built a whole campaign really around that. And it was, it picked up a lot of press, but also you feel really good about what you're doing. And then the following year, was this with Josh Jacobs, where we used the Super Bowl to raise $2 million for youth homelessness. And it was, during the game, Josh Jacobs was a former homeless. He was formerly homeless, and then he became a football player, but he never really forgot his roots. So we used not only the commercial itself, but also Twitter. We had every yard that he rushed, was more money raised for youth homelessness. So it was really a way of making sure that purpose was a part of everything we do. So then even this year, when we do a spot about this dog finding his forever home, we thought, oh my gosh, there are so many dogs out there that need to be adopted. When the pandemic first hit, all these dogs were adopted, because I remember doing something for another organization that was we were going to do something about getting dogs adopted, and then all of a sudden dogs were adopted. But then as people started to return to work, suddenly all these dogs were back in shelters and they needed homes. So we decided to actually pair up in Kia with the Pet Finder. Since the commercial's about helping dogs find their forever homes, let's help real dogs find their homes. And Kia was excited to participate in that. So not only are they giving a donation, but then all of our efforts are about how do we continue that conversation to help Pet Finder. So one of the things we created was this. We created this, essentially this dogmented reality, so that people could not only bring this robo dog into their lives, but they could also learn a little bit more about real dogs that need to be adopted. So I'll play you this. So you didn't have to download an app for that, which was great. It was web-based. So it was so because of that, a lot of people participated in that. But then we think, okay, it was great. We raised a lot of awareness. What else can we do? So then we go to TikTok, and we created, from the commercial, we have that song "Turn Around." So we actually integrated that into this TikTok, where it was a TikTok dance challenge. Where essentially what we did is we built it so the dog would circulate 3 times. And we seeded it with 3 influencers of, some pug, some dogs, and a couple of dancers. But then before you know it, this thing just took off, and it was basically this turnaround challenge. And in a week and a half, it had 49 million views. So it's more people, and everything came back to, the messages on a lot of that. The caption on that was, hey, make sure you go to Pet Finder to learn more about how we can help these dogs. Then even the assets that we created were turned into NFTs, and those were going for, some of those were going for $3,000 and $4,000 a piece. Also raising more awareness for it. So it's really about, bravery is about making sure that you have purpose in everything you do. So we try to really extend that across the brand. Speaking of which kind of dovetails into this is Brave takes a stand. And what we always try to do is, no matter what we're doing, if we're, you always, sometimes it's more easy to relate something to purpose, but, sometimes you have to work a little bit harder to make those connections. One of them is Stacy's pita chips. So when it came time to working on Stacy's pita chips, if you think about it, from a client perspective, a lot of times what they want to talk about is, hey, talk about the intrinsics of this product. It tastes really good with hummus. It pairs well with blank. It's great on for breakfast or a lunch, and that's not really taking you to an emotional space. That's not taking a stand. But if you take a step back from that, you say, hey, guess what? Before Stacy's was bought out by Frito-Lay, it was started by a female founder. What can we do to help other female-founded businesses? And that's really what it was. Can we be part of something bigger? And yeah, there's still going to be times when we're going to talk about the chips and the way they taste and what they can pair with, but let's be part of something bigger and do more for the brand. So that led to this right here.
During the past year, over 15 million American small businesses saw revenue decline with the threat of closure.
The resurgence of COVID-19 this week has brought deepening anxiety for millions of small businesses.
And according to the World Economic Forum, female-founded businesses were hit harder than anyone.
Surviving the pandemic as a woman has been a real struggle.
That's a shame that the money you'd saved to, grow your business is now being used just to keep it up and running.
As a female-founded business that started small, Stacy's Pita Chips knew that they had to do something to help. So they did something unheard of. Instead of advertising chips, they shared every possible resource to help female-founded businesses rise. Presenting Stacy's Share for Her, a platform created to share all Stacy's resources with 30 female founders who are helping their communities. We started by sharing our ad space. We developed tailored ads with each founder. We shared camera equipment, a script, and edited the material with custom graphics. Then we shared Stacy's media dollars and created a geo-targeted media plan to drive their sales. We supported them by sharing financial grants and mentorship. Then, to help tens of thousands more, we even shared our bags as a medium, transforming them into a female founder finder, a geolocation-based platform that helps consumers find female-founded businesses near them, and gave female founders the opportunity to register their business in our finder. In total, the effort secured over 2.5 billion total media impressions. The Stacy's #ShareForHer platform showed what's possible when we share. Because when we all share, we all rise.
Stacy's is a brand that, even though they're owned by Frito-Lay, their budgets are extremely small. So the fact that we could get 2.5 billion impressions from that had a lot to do with the idea. But I think one of the things that we were most proud of is building that database. How can sometimes people want to help female-founded businesses, but they don't know where to find them. So this was all about building that database that was based on your location. So it was all about it. But at the end of the day, it's still an ad for a chip, but yet it can be so much more. Next up here is a kind of something else that kind of passed on to you is Brave doesn't wait for the assignment. And what that is it's about being proactive. And I think when you guys start your jobs, that's one of the things I would encourage you to do. Sometimes people come to my office and they say, how can I get ahead? And the number one tip I would give them is be proactive as you can. You're going to get assignments and you're going to be buried in assignments. But what else can you do that the client isn't even necessarily asking for? Find out, hey, guess what? Here's this other product that maybe the client isn't even talking about. What if we did something for this? Or, hey, I discovered something else about this, or I read about this, or or I just came across this insight for this. What if we do this? Taking a look at the brands that you work on and say, what else can I do? And that sort of led to this, which was for Vizio. So Vizio is a brand that we've done work for quite a bit, and we've done $1 million TV spots for them, but we also, and a lot of it had to do with the televisions that they do. But we thought, what else can we do for them? And we looked at, they also had these sound bars. They had these amazing sound bars that they weren't even talking about. And we said, could we do something for these sound bars? So we look at everybody else, and the way everyone else was talking about all the electronics is it became a lot of tech speak. It was talk about your refresh rate, talk about the awards that you won, talk about all this technical mumbo jumbo that doesn't really connect with consumers. So what we said is, okay, let's make our own assignment here. And we said, why don't we do something for the soundbar? So we approached them and they said, we don't know. We don't know if we really want to spend the money on that right now. So what we did is we said, okay, we believe in this. We're going to actually go out and do the work ourselves. So what we did is we came up with this idea for the soundbars, and we thought, rather than talk about all the technical features of these soundbars, who has the most incredible hearing in the world? It's dogs. Dogs can hear 4 times better than humans. So we thought, what if we just take that insight and build a whole campaign around that? And the campaign was hear like they do. So what you did is, so we went out and actually hired a photographer on our own to shoot this. So the photographer, was completely excited about it. And so we went out and shot these. So it's hear like they do. So we see these dogs in very human-like positions. We don't even show the speakers. It's Vizio soundbars. So we go out and shoot that. And then we go out and shoot this as well, where it's, we thought, okay, there's all these dogs have their own sort of stories that they'd be watching. Maybe he's watching a crime drama, and the first one might be watching a rom-com, and you have all these different sort of personalities, even the one watching the sports game. So we share it with the client after we've already shot it. And the client says, I love this, let's produce it. And then they spend money. Then it was sort of one of those things that we invested to begin with. And now suddenly they love it. And they said, not only that, can you turn that into other content? Let's not just do these still, like we created these assets essentially. And then from those assets, we were able to create 6-second spots, 15 seconds, social, a whole UGC campaign out of it, so it all started from just an idea that wasn't even an assignment. And I'll just play you this. So this was something that we took that still, and then our friends at a VFX company, Jam, said, let's build this thing out. Let's add parallax to this and make this whole shot seem like it's alive. Imagine what that dog would actually be listening to. So I'll play you this.
No distance could ever tear us apart. I'll always love you, Francois.
I love a little quiver from the dog there. Here's another one.
See, the thing is, when you talk, there are consequences. And around here, we ain't about to let people off with a warning.
So if we don't proactively pursue that, that doesn't happen. That's not an assignment that happens. So the reason I share that with you guys is to keep that in mind. As you guys are starting your job and you're getting a list of this is what we're advertising, look beyond that. See what else you can produce out there. Okay, Brave invades new spaces. What you're also going to be getting when you start working is, and maybe you're dealing with that now, or perhaps you're kind of creating your own work. But you also get a list of deliverables. Okay, this is what we need to do. We already purchased the media for this. We already are going to do these social buys. We've already got this out-of-home board. Go. And yes, you're going to have to do that if the media's already been bought. But what else can you do? So that's what a Brave thing that we've learned over the years is Brave invades new spaces. Create your own media. Be experiential. Do all those things that maybe people didn't expect. Go into their spaces. And that's really what led to when we were working on Universal. Universal came to us. This was a few years, but I'll show you how this sort of like they build on each other. Is they had a King Kong ride. Hey, we want to do some TV spots for a King Kong ride, and we thought, hey, what can we do that's a little bit bigger? Yes, we'll do the television, but what else can we do? And if the new graphics in this ride were supposed to be extremely realistic, so we thought, okay, this is happening in Los Angeles. What if we made the city of Los Angeles feel like it was attacked by King Kong? So what we did was this is just some pieces of this, but essentially what we did was overnight, we had dug footprints in the sand at the beach, these huge 15-foot footprints coming out of the beach, really all over the city, but they started at the beach there. So that we actually crushed a lifeguard stand, had it smoking, and suddenly cops are showing up, the morning news is there, and it gets all this press. But it wasn't just there, it was Dodger Stadium. We had the footprints all through the field, on the outfield wall, and the client is like, oh my God, this is amazing. We started with just this television ask, and we built all these other things. It was essentially all over the entire city. Even we did a wrap in the LA Times of, ape on the loose, look out for it. And then what happens with this is when you do something like this, your client comes back to you for the next assignment and says, oh, what else are we going to do for this? So then when it came time to launch the Transformers ride, we said, okay, tourists are coming there. Tourists are going to be visiting this place. where are tourists coming from? They're coming on planes. So we looked at what is in the flight pattern flying into LAX. It's a high school. What if we burn something on the field of this high school so that as people are flying into town, they're like, holy shit, what is this? Transformers are coming. It's burned out in the field. I still can't believe the high school allowed us to do this, but with a little bit of money, they were willing, and I think they were excited to be part of it too. They hung up pictures of this, and it's still probably there. Before you know it, news is covering this. And suddenly you become part of a much bigger conversation than what TV spot you're running. We went down to the Staples Center, which I guess now Crypto Center, and had it, we had all this destruction within the street, but we also had the whole outline. It looked like a Decepticon had burst through the wall. But then what we did is like, let's say we've all seen these people on street corners, but let's have them actually, spread our message. Yes, the end is near. Transformers are coming, and this is in front of Disney Hall. That's where he's standing in front of, but really, really essentially all over Los Angeles, some of them in Spanish as well. And suddenly it becomes part of a bigger conversation, and what's exciting is all this stuff is, friends are sharing things that have no idea I even worked on this campaign, and it becomes part of culture. So then last year when it came time for Jurassic World, we kept it up, but now we thought, let's do this in a way that uses even more modern technology. So yes, we could use the alerts on the road, warning escaped dinosaurs, excuse me. But then we also, and of course, down at the, what do dinosaurs like to chow on too? Some goats here and there. So we put up some little messages here and there. Missing goats, please help find JoJo. And you just put some of these messages throughout the city a little bit on a smaller scale. You got the bigger messages, but you kind of have a little fun with this, and it also gives you a little more material for your. The client is very much in favor of, but also gives you more material for your case studies. But then what we did was, we decided to build a drone that looked like a pteranodon. It was actually multiple drones. So these drones look like these a pteranodon, like a pterodactyl type, and essentially, not only that, they were equipped with sound. Each one of them did. So they scare the shit out of people as they're flying. And we sent them over the near Hollywood, near the Hollywood Hills. Pteranodon sighting. Keep pets and children inside. And suddenly we're flying them all throughout there. And we even, for one time, we had a mannequin that he was one of the pteranodon held in his mouth, but it looked so fake. We had to drop that after about 15 minutes. But we just left them sort of flying around, looked like Game of Thrones approaching, and essentially flew them all around. So again, it was like, okay, we're going to do a television spot, but let's do a lot more. So it's about Brave is invading new spaces. So anytime you can try to find new opportunities, think about new ways of getting it out there beyond what the asks are, I encourage you to do so. Brave doesn't make excuses. Sometimes, especially as you're starting off, I will say at Dave and Goliath, everybody gets a shot at Super Bowl. You could be there 1 week and it's going to be open up to you, but there are certain assignments that, hey, you might have to work on something here or there. And you think, is this glamorous? One of the such assignments was for Jack in the Box. And they asked us to do some coupons for a fast food retail place. Okay, so you think, gosh, can I make this interesting? Well, you can if you don't make excuses. Brave doesn't make excuses. Brave says, you know what, I'm going to make something that's going to be a little more interesting. How do I make that epic? How do I make every assignment account, even this one? And a lot of times what you realize is these are the kind of assignments that are under the radar. These are the kind of things that maybe not as many eyes are looking at, so you can really kind of push something through that you're very excited about. So we thought, if we're going to build a coupon, then let's make it the biggest fucking coupon you can imagine. So we said, let's break a world record with this coupon. So that's what we did with this. Is I'll show you here. We literally broke a world record with the world's largest coupon. We not only built this huge coupon, but then we sent Jack through a drive-through to redeem this coupon. So that led to this. So that's that. Yeah. So don't balk at the assignment. You know, make the most out of every one of them. And then speaking of which, too, is a brave seizes every opportunity. So when the pandemic first hit, I think there was across the board, all brands said, "Hey, guess what? We're gonna be serious right now." In fact, there was even ad bingo that was in these uncertain times. You know, everybody's having that same somber message, and of course, you know, you need to do so. But at the same time, you know, as after that for a little while, you still have to think about, okay, is there an opportunity in this to still stay on brand? You know, can we, you know, as for instance, for a Jack in the Box brand, how can we still have that quirky personality come through? But how can we still can we provide PPEs? Can we do something that is still safe, but at the same time stays on brand? So that led to chicken scented masks.
Jack in the Box is offering up chicken scented masks.
Yeah, that's right. You can get a chicken scented mask.
A fried chicken scented face mask.
It's like chicken, but it's not. I can't believe it.
Smells like chicken, wears like a mask.
I don't even know where you come up with something like this.
I'm telling you, it really smells like chicken.
It kind of smells like the early 1990s. Is that paprika?
Very chickeny. I'm just gonna take this. All right. Very chickeny.
It's it's seizing every opportunity and staying on brand. Okay, so that's all the work. But then what I wanted to do here is just a few other little thoughts in general. You know, that other ways of sort of interpreting brave. Brave is this mindset. You know, and no matter what comes your way, you just have to keep that in mind. And across the board on anything you do. Brave finds its tribe. You know, one of the things that is unheard of is the fact that I've been at a place for 22 and a half years. You know, and part of that is the fact that when you find a group of people, prior to this, I freelanced at a number of places. And when you do, you constantly saw, okay, if I get this job, then I'm going to go get this job. And then if I get that job, then maybe I could go get that job. And it's this constant moving back and forth. And I think what you try to do is, at least what I've tried to do is build that tribe and find like-minded people. You're going to find your people that allow you to do the work that you want to do. It, you know, and sometimes it can get, I know at other agencies, it was, you know, people even hide their work. They don't want other of us to see it because it's competitive, you know, but if you find your tribe, you find like-minded people, you know, as you walk down the hallways, we want to find a shop. You know, one of the things I could say about Dave and Goliath is it's constantly, hey, what do you think of this? Is there a way that you have to make this thing better? And we feed off of each other, you know. So where you work, try to find that tribe of like-minded people. And part of that too is build instead of chase. And it's just a, you know, I think when I opened the doors with David Angelo years ago, and there were like 3 others, it was, let's take our learnings from other places, and rather than chase down something else, let's make it part of who we are. And so I encourage you, you know, wherever you end up, you know, and you know, it's part of the business is you move around a little bit, and sometimes you do that in order to get the raise that you needed to get. But sometimes what you can do is you know, stick around and build that, make it the place that you want. So I'll give that as a sort of thought. Brave attracts brave. You're going to find other people. This is a little example of the brave stage as well. Brave trusts its gut. It has no other agenda. You know, and one of the things I started in the beginning is talking about that is there's something inside each of us, and that's the reason that drives us. And I'm sure you realize in this, especially if you're second year students, is, you know, at the beginning you listen a lot to instructors and everyone. Of course, that's why you're there. But you also start to develop your own voice, your own gut. You know, and I remember even when I was finishing school, there were very polarizing pieces that I had in my book, and some people said, you don't want those in there. And you know, those are the pieces I decided to keep in there because I thought that's also a filter for the agencies I want to work at. If they like this, then I'm gonna want to. We're gonna get along well. So trust its gut. It has no other agenda. You know, the more you're in this business, the more you're selling work. You know, you have other agendas along the way. You know, but never forget about your agenda because that's what's ultimately going to lead to the best work. Brave responds to every setback with a greater comeback. You know, no matter what happens, at some point, something's going to happen. You know, you might get asked off a piece of business. You might lose a piece of business. But Brave comes back from that even stronger. You know, there are times when it's happened to our agency. It happens to me personally. But I think what you do is you learn from that, and then you build on that, and you come back even stronger. So Brave is resilient enough to come back on that. And lastly, Brave loves the process. You know, this job is incredibly rewarding. You get to do some pretty amazing things. But before you get to the shoot, before you get to winning the award, before you get to any of that, you have to love being in a room, concepting with somebody at 2 o'clock in the morning on your 10th round. You have to love that process. So I encourage you, you know, that's the people that do well and succeed. They're people, you know, I went to school years ago. There are a lot of them that got out of the business, you know, but the ones that are in it that have done well are the ones that love the daily grind as well. So I encourage you as much as you can to find and love that process. And I think that's everything. You know, I've been chatting for a while, and I will I'll stop sharing so I can see more of your faces.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ben. I think right now, if anyone has any questions, you can write them in the chat or raise your hand and we'll call on you or shout them out. And then if there's no questions, we can maybe jump to the post-forum chat, but let's see if there's any questions.
I'll jump in with a question first. So this idea of bravery has been threaded so much through the agency. And since you started the agency, I would love for you to share with us a little bit of like, how did the four of you decide that this was going to be the thing that would be threaded throughout the agency? Did just your experience through all the different agencies, did it just kind of come down to this, that this was going to be the culture? How did this come about?
I think it sort of evolved over time a little bit. You know, what I would say when we first opened our doors, we knew with it we were going to be working on challenger brands, and I think bravery was going to be part of it. But I think we evolved over time. So I think in the early days it was, let's do the coolest shit that we can and let's try to win some awards. You know, to be honest with you. But I think what we started to realize is, you know what's even more rewarding is when we do this. You know, and I think it's that feeling you get when you work on something. You know, it might have been a campaign that we did for the California lottery, or it might have been. I think it was just a project that we picked up, and yes, we had those learnings, but I think it was always there, but we just brought it to the forefront a little bit more, you know, the longer we've been doing it, you know, and I think in the early days too, what we realized is in the early days, you had to talk clients into it. You know, you had to really say, let them know why do you want to be purposeful, and let them, sometimes they get scared with Brave. We're not for everyone, but I think what we realize is, that's okay. We're not gonna work for everyone, you know. But then you have even brands like Frito-Lay at their keynote speech talking about how do we bring purpose to the everyday. So I think even clients, you know, as Simon Sinek says in his TED Talks, you know, people don't buy what you buy, they buy why you sell it. So I think it's just fortunately what's going on in the world now is caught up to where we were, but you know, I wouldn't say we've started there from the very beginning, but we've certainly evolved to that.
That's awesome.
Great. Any other questions? John Simmons.
Hey, Ben, how are you? Great presentation, great work.
Well, thank you.
And I'm wondering, I guess, like, what is your relationship with the strategy team? Like, how does that process, what does the process look like from strategy to, you know, the creative idea? And then what is the involvement, I guess, afterwards or like, during the project time?
Yeah, I love working with strategists. It is, I know that there's other creatives that I've known in the past that you do your thing for the client and I'm going to do my thing for the work. You know, it's almost like it's just something that we're going to show for the client. But I think the way I like to work with them is sit in a room with them and figure out those insights. You know, like for instance, say the dog that hears 4 times, you know, we know that they have amazing hearing. That might have been something that came from creatives, but we talked to them and suddenly they're bringing all kinds of graphs and charts. Well, do you know that the concentric circles of audiophiles and dog lovers are also overlapped by this much? You know, so it's just building more of that presentation that we can get. You know, and it's I love to sit in a room with strategists and roll up the sleeves, and I also love when strategists stay involved in the process, so that it's not just here's the brief. No, this brief is going to continue to evolve just as the work continues to evolve. You know, I talked to strategist just last night about, hey, we're building some case studies as, you know, as the award season comes around here, but it's part of baked into who we are, you know, and I think because that's part of the process and it's respected at D&G, I think it's completely welcomed, you know.
Incredible, thank you.
Mm-hmm. I see a question here.
Question in the chat.
Okay, yeah. For a company, go ahead.
No, you go ahead, Ben.
For companies that aren't there yet, how do you convince them to spend money on deserving people or causes and not strictly advertising? Like Stacy's sharing all their resources. It is you start with baby steps. You know what it is okay, and I think what it is showing them a little bit of the return on investment. You know, they still need to see that at the end of the day. There's something we're doing right now for Kia that I can't share yet that I'm incredibly excited about. But part of even getting that through is, okay, what does that mean? It's not just what are these dollars spent, but what does that mean on earned media? Look at all these headlines that it's leading to. But not only that, look at all the dogs that were adopted. We put together a presentation on, you know, the effect that we have on those people. You know, clients too, a lot of times these days, they're having separate CSR budgets, you know, so they are looking for certain things like that. So I think it is an uphill battle, but I think you start with the smaller things, you know, like it's a smaller investment, and over time you get them to build on that and get more excited about it and increase the budget next time. How do you find the balance of using brands for greater purpose without sounding inauthentic? That's a great question. I think you have to think about, is this an area that we can play in a space, or is this just an area that's going to make us cause washing or whatever you want to call it. I think you have to, and a lot of times what we do with brands is the first thing we do with them is we have a brainstorming session where we try to find what is their DNA, you know, and when we go to a new business pitch and we ask the client what excites you most, and if they just say, hey, I want more people to stay at my hotel, okay, that's not it. You know, what is it? Okay, can it be something a little bit deeper? And when can it be a little bit deeper, you can try to find out what space can they authentically own. And I think you have to be careful for that. And I think you know, like in the Stacy's, for instance, because we started as a female-founded business, we wanted to help other female-founded businesses. And initially, we also talked about how else do we just help women in general be noticed. And I think, you know, part of what, you know, we went back and forth with the client on is we need to make sure that this still stays around the female-founded businesses, because that displays a space that we can authentically own. So I think you have to be careful on that, but it's you know, looking at those nuance can make sure that you don't end up on the wrong side of it. Well, great. Are there any other questions? Then thank you for your time and thanks for listening.